Ladies and gentlemen, and guys, gals, non binary pals, hello. Hi, not on Twitch. I know this is a surprise to everyone involved, but here we are again today. Hi, I'm John. Uh, I hope you're doing well. And yeah, so let me tell you why we're here. This is important, I think, or at the very least, interesting. So, 2 weeks ago, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, I did a series of writing exercises and put them out. And wow, it was popular. I was surprised. I was genuinely surprised and went on with my day and went on with my week and thought to myself, wow, people really seem to be liking this. I should do more. So that's what I have today. We have more. So if you're new, if you have no idea what this is, if you don't know the first thing about it, hi, I'm John. I'm a guy who helps you write better. I've spent half my life doing this, and I look forward to spending another hour and a half or so, giving you some more tools to help you write whatever you're writing better. Sound good? It's pretty low fuss. So my goal, my plan, the idea of it is to basically equip you in some ways that you don't normally see other stuff happen. Most writing advice when you sit down and go online is very broad and very vague up to a point. Then all of a sudden it gets very clear when people move towards publishing. Oh, if you're going to go publish this way, you do these things. You're going to go publish that way, you do those things. But the steps before that, the writing steps, yeah, everybody just hand waves a lot of those away. Oh, you need a main character. You need a plot. You need some world. You need this. You need that. And the particulars just don't come up. Like, just have those things. It's sort of like saying, cook a very fancy meal. You need food. And I did the first set of exercises and people were just enthusiastic, surprisingly so, like eagerly so. And I thought, well, let's do some more. Let's see what we can do and accomplish today, where we're going to take a look at 6 different things that we don't normally talk about when we talk about writing exercises. Because most everybody, when they do writing exercises, right, they do one of two things. They either do prompts, which is just, here's an idea, make up this thing. Or they do what's basically a questionnaire. Does your main character, chew bubble gum? Does your world have cars? And there's a real problem with both of those things. One more so than the other, but both have, a certain specific shortcoming. When you do prompt work, whatever the prompt is, no matter what the prompt is, it's not that they're automatically wrong. Prompts can be great, but they are disconnecting you from the thing you're writing. Because if you just want to write a 500 words about, I saw a pretty leaf, meanwhile, your fantasy novel over there is not getting done. And you're still stuck in the spot you're stuck with. And you're still wondering how you're going to make the bad guy feel like a threat. But no, I got 500 words on this leaf. It's not necessarily a comparable skill. So then people were like, well, I don't have to do a prompt. I can ask questions. And you see this a lot on social media. Everybody and their mom is asking, like, well, does your main character, would they go to the movies? Would you hang out with them? And that sounds closer. It sounds like we're getting nearer to the thing we need to be doing because at least now we're talking about our own work. But at the end of the day, it's still, navel gazing. We're still sitting there just diddling ourselves, going, well, we're imagining stuff. You're not helping your manuscript. The book, the thing you want to publish, the thing you say is important, the thing you've been dreaming about being for however long you've been dreaming it. Yeah, see, there's so much potential. There's so much material. There's so much stuff there you can dig into and deal with and work with right there in that book. You don't need any other exercises. I understand it can get boring. You might want to change. And there are ways we can interpret and change and shake things up so you don't get too bored. But by and large, your book, what you want to say, what you want to do. Like, that's a kooky amount of work, like a ridiculous amount of space to cover. And I think that's where writing exercises tend to fall flat. So I've got 6 for you that you can turn and tailor to your own work, whatever you're writing, good, bad, or otherwise. Oh, Pete is here in chat. Remember Pete? He was here a couple weeks ago. Hi, Pete. It's good to see you. I'm working on my characters, starting an outline, also researching stuff. Pete, that's thrilling. I'm so happy to hear that. Thanks for being here today. Um, shall we do some exercises? Shall we get working on some stuff? Let's give it a shot. Oh, side note, somebody asked, why am I not on Twitch? Just to shake it up. Okay, honestly, there's a simpler, more practical reason. The YouTube upload process is atrocious. I don't know if that's gonna, kick me off this thing or whatever, but I hate it. You upload a thing and it says it'll be ready in 3 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours, 22 minutes, and it ping pongs around, and I never have a sense of when it's done. But I can just go live on YouTube. Now, granted, I'm running the risk a little bit more open and exposed to the world, but hey, we'll all be good people and good stewards of each other, and we'll get through this together, won't we? So we're on YouTube today, outside the comfort zone, flying a little free, seat of the pants. Here we go. Exercise number 1 of 6. First of all, I do want to point out, as I said, that, hey, your manuscript has everything you need, and your writing exercises should work in that space, period. If they don't, you need new exercises. You've got everything you need. And just so we're clear, so that somebody doesn't come at me later, it's not bad or wrong. It's just frequently not enough for what people are dealing with. The big problem is that the more we go outside of the manuscript for writing prompts and exercises, the harder it's going to be to come back to the manuscript and take those tools that the prompt allegedly gave us and apply them to our stuff. So we stay here in the boundaries of our book, and we answer questions, and we think and work in that space. It's just better. It's just going to make a better product. It's going to make you a better writer. It's going to help you do all the things you want to do. It is the vastly, vastly better choice. So that said, not question number 1. I've been doing chats too long. Idea number 1, exercise number 1, writing consequences for plot. This is something that gets very hairy, very tangled, very quickly. Don't freak out. We're going to make it not complicated, but there's going to be some charts. There's going to be some vertical lines. Don't panic. I will do my best to walk you through them. But we're going to start with just some real basic stuff. Anything, everything, all the things, big, small, somewhere, some way, should have some consequence as to what happens later in the story. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Now, hang on a minute. Hear me out. I'm not saying that this is one of those, nonsense cases where somebody steps on a butterfly and suddenly human beings are turning into chickens. You don't need to take the tiny little thing and make it have this huge impact, because sometimes tiny little things just have tiny little impacts. But there should be an impact. There should be some kind of consequence, even if that consequence is just, oh, well, the person running away from the monster steps on a twig, snaps the twig. The monster is alerted. It doesn't mean like they're running from the monster, they step on a twig, the twig snaps, and then suddenly, the Marines launch an assault somewhere. No, we just want to keep things contextually aware so that your material, whatever it is, has very clear like causes and effects and a chain of events, and that a thing you mention, a thing you bring up matters down the road. One idea leads to another idea because that first idea is a thing. Nothing in a story should be done in a vacuum. And no, you don't need to massively over entangle everything. Oh, well, remember in chapter 1 where we put on the blue t-shirt? Clearly, it's because they're out of blue t-shirts now in the end of the book that we can find who the killer is. No, it doesn't. You don't need to tie everything all the time together. I'm saying that if you've got a thing in a story, somewhere else in the story, that thing should matter. So Pete brings up an excellent question. If you've got a character with anxiety and depression, you want to show somewhere in the plot how that affects the character. Yes, yes, you do, because otherwise, you were saying those factors, those features, those elements of character, anxiety and depression, are no different than them being blonde or them wearing a certain brand of shoe. You want to make these things that are impactful to the reader because, readers have anxiety and depression. Writers have anxiety and depression. They're a big deal to us. We want to have those same kind of functions, that same sort of depth in our character, because that way the reader says, oh, yeah, the writer gets it. The writer can, speak to anxiety and speak to depression because it does feel like something more than just a brand label on a shoe or just some disposable throwaway idea. Okay, I see how these things play a role in the story because the writer understands that these things play a role in life. Nothing lives in a vacuum. So, how do we do this? There's two factors to, not factors, two tools, two pathways to think about this. One is very straightforward. It's called linear consequences, where an event triggers another event. A to B to C. You can't get to C without going to B. You can't get to B without starting at A. A to B to C. Linear, straight line. But A to B to C linear consequences, although super common for a ton of stuff in a story. Your plot's often linear. Your world building, your actions in a scene can be linear. Loads of stuff's linear. Don't overthink it. It just means that things happen in a certain order. First this, then that. That's all that means. Sometimes, though, we want to be non-linear. Sometimes, though, we don't want to go A to B to C. We want to delay and swap and hold off C until way later and go A, B, R, and then go to C. So sometimes we have what's called non-linear consequences, where the setup, the movement from one thing to the next, is separated from the chain of events that provoked it. So, for instance, a character changing their mind early in the story doesn't directly and exactly lead to the villain losing their temper during the villain monologue at the end of the book, but you can say, well, if the character didn't change their mind, they wouldn't have changed their actions, which wouldn't have led the story moving forward so that they wouldn't have the villain confrontation, so that there wouldn't be the villain monologue. Those are nonlinear consequences, things that happen in a story that we don't necessarily see an immediate or a near immediate payoff for can have payoffs later. Sometimes you see this in kids' cartoons, right? Like, we see an early thing like, oh, the character is practicing to shoot, a target with a bow and arrow. And then at the end of the story, like in order to win the day, the good guy has to shoot a target with an arrow. That's a non-linear consequence because we didn't immediately see like the big deal it was at the beginning of the story, but it's coming back at the end. We're bringing it back. That's a nonlinear consequence. A linear consequence is, you know, I get in the car, I press the pedal, I push the button, the car starts, I back the car out of the driveway, and I drive to the store. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things happen. Thinking about linear and nonlinear consequences as options for how things can happen in a scene and bigger picture in a story can help us sort of break up the idea of like, I don't know what happens next in the story. Because you should absolutely know what happens next in the story. Just sit down and think it through. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be, like I write it down once and I'm never going to change it again. It's just, here's what I'm working on right now. Hello. Thanks for catching me live. Appreciate you being here. It's nice to have you. It's nice to be live. Before I lose my train of thought, I'm going to go back and finish the thought I was having. You don't want to like nail down what you're writing so rigidly that you can't change your mind later. It's a pain in the ass, sure. Of course it is. But linear and nonlinear consequences are ways of setting up and constructing the story so that things can seem more monumental, seem more weighty, seem like a bigger deal without them actually being a bigger deal. But it gives you the reader that impression. Oh, they really figured their stuff out. Look at all the notes. Look how well built this story is. When all you did was decide, I'm going to have these things move linearly and those things move non-linearly. Straightforward. Let's get a little bit more technical. Here comes the big crazy chart. I know, I'm not happy about it either, but we're going to get through this together. So, we can have a progression of plot in a linear fashion. Most plots linear, totally fine, super normal. This happens A, then B, then C, then D, then E, then F. And we can map this out vertically. You could also map it out horizontally. I'm not the boss of you. But either way, we're going to map this thing out. I'm doing it vertically because I only have so much screen space. But you could easily rotate this thing and do it sideways. Who cares? But you want to make sure you're moving forward from the beginning of the book to the end of the book, from the beginning of the story to the end of the story. This. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 until we're done to the end. Now, stuff's going to happen in this plot. What stuff? I don't know. It's your story. You tell me. Stuff's going to happen in this plot. And the stuff that happens, the characters are going to interact with each other. The fights are going to break out. The good guys are going to fight the bad guys. The wizard's going to cast spells. The car is going to go places. They're going to go to the grocery store. They're going to spend money. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. Stuff's going to have consequences. And sometimes those consequences are direct and linear because I do a thing and there's an immediate response around my character. They get out of bed. Okay, what's the next thing that happens? They go fight the bad guy. What's the next thing that happens? Sometimes there's going to be non-linear consequences that feed into stuff later. So for instance, we have a situation A. Something happens in the story. We're just going to call it A. And the consequence is we're going to enumerate our consequences with numbers to distinguish them from events in the story with letters. It's just a shorthand for tracking things. If you would rather write them out as not numbers and letters because it just looks like math, that's fine. Don't make it math. So maybe we can call a character goes to the office and we'll call X1, which is the consequence of character going to the office. The boss yells at them for being late. Direct consequence. X1, character goes to the office, boss yells at them for being late. Simple. Now, we continue our thread of story. We move forward. A goes to B. Characters at the office, consequence, boss yells at them. Character returns to their cubicle, frustrated and upset about being yelled at for the umpteenth time. Fine, sure. Is there a direct consequence to that? Is there an X2? Yes. The character makes a decision that they're going to tell their boss, hey, don't talk to me that way. Now, that X2, that second consequence for the decision of B, is the first step, in addition to being a scene where the character is going to confront the boss. It's the first step in their arc. Because let's say the character arc lays out this idea of, standing up and, don't having some boundaries, having some discipline, standing up and defending yourself. Maybe that's our character arc because maybe that's our theme. So when we get to BX2, the action, the decision to stand up and then standing up for yourself is part of the arc, which also becomes the first step in the theme. One event is also these other things. That's the map. That's this chart moving left to right. B, X2. X2 is also Y1, which is also Z1. Straightforward. Now, if you're going to ask me, hey, John, why are these things positioned vertically in the chart that they are? because where they happen in the story, one scene, two scene, three scene, four scene, lines up. What's the point of this chart? It's to help me explain to you that sometimes a thing that happens early in a story is not just a thing that happens early in the story. Sometimes it's part of a bigger picture down the road. A, X2, Y1, Z1. B, X, Y, Z. You can also do this with, P, C, A, and T, plot, consequence, arc, and theme. You could also just lay out what the story is. But this is a really simple way of illustrating, hey, why is the character doing this thing? Oh, because it's the first part of their plot. It's the first part of the arc. It's the first part of the theme all at once. Sometimes, though, we want to pay off your consequences down the road. We want to go non-linear, right? So if we're moving forward in our story, let's say after we confront the boss and the boss gets angry and the boss fires the main character, then the character comes home and decides, okay, they're going to go into business for themselves. They're going to, I don't know, become professional vigilantes for hire. Sure, why not? That's just a story idea that popped in my head. So now the decision to start your job itself, D, just because that's where I'm pointing to on the screen. I don't even think you can see my cursor. But let's say the consequence of making that decision isn't felt for several chapters down the road or several scenes later because it puts them into a situation that they would not have faced otherwise. D, in this case, DX5. It's a consequence disconnected from immediately making, from immediate happening. It's not like characters sitting on their couch, I'm going to go be a vigilante. Bad guys come running right in the room. That doesn't happen. That's not what we're doing. But I'm going to go be a vigilante. Sure enough, two scenes from now, they're, getting overwhelmed in a fight with a goon in an alley. DX5. It doesn't matter where the consequence is. It matters that there's a consequence. It doesn't matter where the consequence is in terms of, oh, it's part of the arc. It just matters that it's part of the arc. And the consequence should always lead to evidence of an arc, including plot. So that's plot arc or character arc. And your plot arc or character arc should in some way have a consequence that leads to your theme. That's how we layer these things together. Because of what happens in the story, we can see the arcs, the way things progress from beginning, middle to end, but also the themes, the ideas you want to install in the reader's mind. Hey, this is what my story is about. So that they're not just saying, oh, it's a story about a guy who gets fired from his job and becomes like a rentable mercenary. 1, 2, 3, 4. Linear or non-linear? It does give time to develop scenes in between things. Because if you have it just be linear, right? If we only do AX, B, X2, C, if we only ever set up and then immediately pay off, the story gets put on rails, right? The story becomes really rigid and it's really hard to cut away and do a subplot or cut away and do a flashback. We're just on this path and we're moving at high speed, which is not necessarily always wrong and it's not always a bad thing. But sometimes stories have more than that. Sometimes we have lots of stuff going on. Sometimes we have multiple points of view and big world things and all this other kind of stuff that if we just get stuck on rails, it's going to be hard to bring those other things in. So it's just about learning how to connect the different layers. We'll talk about layers later, layers and levels in a story to help you see, oh, okay, so this thing I'm happening, this event that happens in the story, what's the point of it? Does it work for my plot? Does it work for my character arc? Does it work for my theme? Is it a consequence to a thing? You could also look at it the other way and go, are there enough consequences? Do we need to ratchet things up? Do we need to, tamp things down? Am I doing too much for too little? Am I doing too little for too much? This is going to help you measure and connect the dots more than just trying to answer that and then what happens in the story. So hold the consequence off till later in the story, wait for it to pay off. So Pete, Sometimes. Sometimes, yes, depending on the consequence, you want to hold it for later because it makes the story more interesting. It creates better tension. There's a benefit if you pay it off later, you can do more with it. It's not going to be all the time, just sometimes. It's an option. Sometimes you are going to pay stuff off. Yes, it will make the reader stop and think about what they read earlier, which is really important because that way we make them pay attention because that's the point of reading. It's a really useful thing to think about so that we're not just trying to go, and then what happens? And then what happens? And then what happens? So let's use a great example. Let's use the Matrix. I love the Matrix. It's super easy to explain things using the Matrix. Neo is the one, right? But it's not linear how Neo is the one. Because if it were linear, then he would just be the one because he stops some bullets that Elrond from Lord of the Rings shoots at him. That's not the thing that makes him the one. It's not like prior to the bullets being fired, he wasn't the one, but now, right here, for the first time ever, he is. It's an accumulation of things. It's him, downloading Kung Fu and then learning to be able to manipulate the system. But it's also him failing to make that jump across the gap with Lawrence Fishburne. But it's also him realizing that he has to go rescue Lawrence Fishburne, so he's going to need a lot of guns. But it's also, sort of verified by the fact that Trinity says the person she would fall in love with is supposed to be the one, and she fell in love with Neo, so Neo must be the one. So it's all these different factors coming together that lead Neo to the conclusion, to the consequence that, oh, he's the one. Now, Neo is the one because you've got three factors going together. Neo has agency. That's the ability for a character to make decisions. Character can do stuff in the story. They choose to do things. And because they choose to do things, there are consequences. Because that's what happens when we make choices. Stuff happens. Second thing that Neo has going for him in order to be the one, Neo has the chance to be the one. He has a plot. There's a conflict to resolve. Agency plus opportunity. We're on our way. But we need to go one step further because it's not enough. If we just do agency plus opportunity, we are doing like a little kid story hour, right? Like we're there, we're telling a story, but we're not really like deeply connecting with the reader. We want to wow people the way like watching The Matrix wowed me when it first came out. And when I watched it again later for Patreon and really dove deep into it, it wowed me again. Because there's a third thing we want to add. Agency plus opportunity is great, but it's not until we get into theme where we really have this movie stand out. Because that theme of believing in yourself and accepting who you are and coming into your own identity, that's what helps make our plot seem less like, here's a made up story with made up people, and more like something that you can go, oh, that's really good. That sticks with me. Agency, character making decisions, opportunity, plot, plus theme equals consequence. Yes, I'm streaming on YouTube now. It's a thing I've always been able to do. It's actually warm in here. I got to take this here, get some sweet, sweet hoodie ASMR. Yes, I stream on YouTube now. For a long time, I was streaming on both Twitch and YouTube, and then Twitch was like, if you simultaneously stream on both, we'll ban you. So I stayed on Twitch, and then I realized like, well, I should just do some on YouTube. So here we are on YouTube. Agency, opportunity, and theme. Think on one level, think about, okay, what happens next in my story? That's a great thing. That's a great tool. It's a great question to ask. Very straightforward. But don't only think that question. Don't only do it that way. Also think, if the character does whatever they do, what are the consequences? Do the consequences matter now? Maybe. Do they matter later? Maybe. Both is also possible. You can have it, matter immediately and also matter later. That's an option too. If I eat a sandwich now, theme helps plot matter more to the reader. Yes. Yes, theme is one of the things. There are many things, But theme is one of the things that help plots matter more for the reader, because otherwise plot is just stuff that happens that needs to be resolved. Theme helps glue things together. I'm not crazy about the Twitch interface either, to be honest. Like, it's okay. I just want the easiest possible way to do the most I want to do, which is why I use neither like straight up YouTube or OBS. I use a completely third program to do it because I'm happier here with this thing now that I have the bugs, worked out and everything. But yes, theme is glue. Theme is adhesive that helps glue and stick our stuff together. What was I saying? Right. Plot points. So you can have your consequence happen a little bit now and a little bit later. The example I was going to use was I ate a sandwich for lunch. It was delicious. The immediate consequence of I ate a sandwich for lunch was I'm no longer hungry. But the long-term consequence of me eating the sandwich is that I have the energy to go do this stream. It can be both. It doesn't always have to be positive, but you can have both immediate and long-term consequences to a thing, just like real life. Questions so far? Otherwise, we're going to keep going. There's another plot exercise coming. This one doesn't have a name. This was always when I learned this in school, it was always the other plot exercise, which is not a great name. So instead, we're going to call it bigger and better because at least that sounds impressive. Here's what bigger and better as an exercise does. You want to think about your plot, the plot of your story, the thing characters are trying to do. You want to think about it in terms of it being a consistent escalation done in small steps. Plot on its own always seems hollow and characters feel directionless. Yes, because if we just look at plot in a vacuum, it is going to be hollow. And without progression, characters are just doing stuff to do stuff. So yes, here's how we're going to give them stuff to do. You want to consistently escalate through small steps and take your big giant challenge in small pieces so that as things progress, we ramp it up. It's never, well, I shouldn't say never. It's super, 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 super seldom ever. Tiny little step, huge giant thing. Unless we're sitting on the ground playing with a little kid with some toys or some Legos and we're unbound by the structures of narrative and we're just goofing around. Any other situation where we're not doing that, we probably want to do better than that. So learning how to take your big giant challenge, your big giant plot, and breaking it into lots of little steps like slicing a cake or breaking up a pizza, itty bitty digestible pieces, rather than we're going to eat it all at once. That's fine, but we're going to do it in small bites. Learning how to ramp it up so that as we progress from event to event, and every time we go forward, we also increase stakes, we also increase tension, we also increase risk, is going to make our story feel way more impactful without us really ever having to stop and look at what's immediately in front of us. We want to keep a rough idea about like, oh, well, 10 steps, I know, 10 chapters from now, vaguely this is going to happen. But we only ever have to do like the small step in front of us. Small steps help keep the reader engaged, helps keep the pressure off you, the writer, from thinking, oh my God, I have to puppeteer 10 million things. Nope, you don't. You don't have to make this harder on yourself. Nice, small, simple steps. And then just go to the next one because step plus step plus step plus step plus step is what leads us to the plot. It's never just one big giant thing. Every time you move forward in a plot, every time we go to the next thing, we need to increase a few things. The challenge to the characters should always be increasing. Some amount. Doesn't always have to be the same standardized amount. It's not like we always go up 5 units of challenge. It just has to go up at least one. It should get harder as we go. Two, things should be more urgent. Oh my God, we're getting closer to the end. Let's go. We're almost there. The urgency to accomplish our goals or character goals should be increasing. Again, not always the same number of units, but at least one. The stakes. We talked about stakes before. There's a whole other video on stakes you can find right here on this YouTube channel. It's really good. Check it out. The stakes should also be increasing as we go. Now, let's flip this around. Let's think a little future. Let's look long term, because while those things are increasing, they're not the only things that are increasing. Potential reward is increasing. We're doing more. The story's picking up speed. Characters are developing more stuff. Things are paying off. There should be more rewards. We're doing more stuff. There should be more reward. Bigger rewards, more frequent rewards, rewards we didn't see coming. There should be something. Reward should increase. And also, because we're moving forward, we're getting closer to our ending, we're building towards our climax, we should also be facing more obstacles. It should be getting harder. The challenge is going up, the urgency is going up, the obstacles should also go up. We're increasing loads of these things as we move the story forward. Now, we talked, I believe it was in the stakes video, where we talked about the staircase, a presentation of stakes where things stack upward. Step, 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 step. A to B to C to D. It's a staircase. Now, I like this visual. I think it's really effective for explaining this. We have a status quo, and then something happens. We're going to call it A in this case. A transitions to B when something happens. We're in one scene, something happens, and then we can go to the next scene. And it isn't just we leave the scene. There's some critical thing in A that happens that allows us to move to B. Not just, well, the camera moves or I start another paragraph. An event, a thing, a story element. What is it? I don't know. It depends on what you're writing. We can't reveal that, oh, you found, the Hobbit found the magic ring without first revealing, oh, that's a magic ring. We can't, bring up, oh, he learns the ways of the Force until we first have a moment of, oh, that guy can teach me the Force. There's always a moment on our visual. If you're watching the video, it's a yellow dot at the sort of the summit of the staircase, a yellow dot that transitions from one place to another, from A to B. Something happens that changes things. It exists every time we move forward. A to B, there's a dot. B to C dot, C to D dot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is that so you don't lose the reader? That's a good question, Pete. Not directly. So yes, it has the side benefit of not losing the reader, but you're not only doing it because you're worried about losing the reader. You're doing it because you need to move the story forward and escalate things and raise it up. The consequence, the side benefit, the, oh, by the way, this, you also get this bell and whistle, is that the reader doesn't get lost. When we do the example, this will make more sense. So we have these moments of A to B to C to D. And as we go forward in our story, which we're illustrating left to right on our chart, everything increases as we go. And things increase upward, and things move from one scene to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, all the way until we're doing a thing. And it's important to notice that the amount of change from A to B is smaller than the change from B to C. A isn't as big a deal. If we were going to give this numbers, let's say A is a 3, B is a 5, and C is a 7, right? We're just going up. We're just counting and adding more. Don't get hung up on the numbers. I'm just trying to pick numbers that are easy in my head to do the illustrating. But we want C to be a bigger deal than A, so 7's bigger than 3. We could have also done 1, 2, 3, and 3 is bigger than 1. That's fine too. But we wanted to make sure that C is a bigger deal than A because we're moving forward, because things are escalating as we go. Let's look at an example of where this happens. Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's a great example. It's a great teaching tool. So we start off with Indiana Jones. He gets the little idol from the little like temple thing. He gets chased by a boulder. The event that helps things transition out of that is he runs into Belloc, the Frenchman, and he has to turn over the statue. And we set up in that transitional moment, we set up this idea. Belloc's a bad guy. Belloc is always going to try and get the upper hand on Indiana Jones. The two of them don't get along. Belloc is willing to cheat, and Belloc would be totally okay if Indiana Jones doesn't survive. He's an antagonist, Belloc. So then we go back, we hand our statue over, we go back to college. We're at Marshall. I think it's Marshall College. That's going to bug me later. I'll Google it. It's fine. But we're moving along. And now the next thing that helps escalate stuff is that we meet Porkins from Star Wars and that other guy in the bow tie, the men from the U.S. Army Intelligence, who tell him, hey, you got to go get the Ark of the Covenant before the Nazis do. So then we're moving along. And now we realize that, in order to get the Ark of the Covenant, we need the headpiece to the Staff of Ra. The only person who has the headpiece is the girl with whom Indiana Jones had an very inappropriate relationship and sexually assaulted, probably by implication. But her presence in the story helps move things forward because we get the headpiece. We discover that the Nazis are after it. We go on the whole adventure. We're escalating 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, all the way up. Now, remember, we're going to tie back to our first exercise with those nonlinear consequences because we introduced Belloc, remember? Well, Belloc comes back because guess who's helping the Nazis? Belloc. Tied the pieces together. Now, getting caught in the well of souls with snakes is just as bad as fighting Nazis in this movie. Snakes are not Nazis. They're different things. But they're both bad, and they both deserve to be fought. But we set up a set of different conditions and a different set of steps. Here's the step. Here's our challenge. This is what changes it. Here's our step. This is the challenge. Here's what changes it. This is the next step. Here's the challenge. This is what changes it. Over and over and over until all of a sudden we've reached the top of our staircase where we've, been rescued by, keeping our eyes shut, Marion, and then top men take the Ark of the Covenant away and top men are looking into it, and then off we go. The movie's over. Staircase. Escalating stakes. The plot gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. But it's never just like if you went back to Indiana Jones in the jungle there, getting the little head statue in the beginning of the movie, and you were like, hey dude, you're gonna get the Ark of the Covenant because that has global implications about what happens. That's going to feel really rushed. It's not going to feel believable. It's going to seem really weird. It's going to seem like you've just like tossed your story in a blender. No good comes from trying to make the story a big deal too quickly. It makes your writing suck. I don't want your writing to suck. It shouldn't do that. So how do we get there? How do we give it this big impact? Small escalating steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. Go up the staircase. Make sense? Questions so far? Because now we're going to go from plot. I think my next set is characters. Yeah. Good so far? Keep going? I know. It's dense. I know. There's a lot. You can handle this. You got it. On we go. Think about pacing like in a movie. Yes, Pete. That's a great way to think about it. Because when we read, whatever we're reading, We're trying to imagine a movie in our brains. Instead of just sitting on the couch watching the big giant TV screen, it's in our heads. Same ideas, same kind of rules apply more or less. So now we're going to move to characters. And one of the flat out worst writing exercises ever, that still is this why in the Matrix Neo doesn't defeat any agents until saving Morpheus? Yes. Yes, Calvin, it is. It's exactly why Neo doesn't defeat any agents until after he saves Morpheus. There's a whole number of thematic and character arc reasons. Yes. Good call. Great question. Great question. All right, characters. One of the worst exercises that's still happening. I saw it on Twitter like an hour before this stream. Is this idea of just how do you hang on a second? I'm going to answer this question because it's really good. How do you escalate if your first conflict is really challenging? Should you consider replotting? Okay. I'm going to answer it. That's a great question. I'm going to answer it in pieces. If your first conflict is really challenging, your next conflict needs to be more challenging than your first conflict. Then your third conflict can be more challenging than your second. If you start off too challenging too quickly, you are scaling up too far too fast. If that's the case, yeah, replot a little bit. It's not an automatic thing where it's like, how do I say this? You do not have to automatically replot. You can have your first conflict be challenging, but understand that if your characters overcome it, you got to raise the bar the next time. Otherwise, the reader's going to sit there and go, well, why is this new thing a big deal? They just like blew up the Death Star in the beginning of the book. So why is, agreeing to a coffee order at Starbucks more challenging than the Death Star? You want to make sure that you are escalating forward to some degree. It doesn't need to be proportional, like we go from one Death Star to two Death Stars, but it does need to be more as we go. So you might want to not necessarily totally replot, but you might want to dial down the challenge, not make it easier, but make the conflict smaller. We don't have to go fighting to save the whole galaxy in the first 5 minutes. We could start with a skirmish that can feel just like fighting the Death Star because, oh my God, it's the first time we've ever really squared off with the bad guys. It might just be one ship, not 1,000. Don't automatically assume that, oh, I fucked up, I have to replot. You don't have to. That's not what this is. But if you've got a real big thing up front, it can be very difficult to navigate and make the next thing bigger, and then bigger after that, and then bigger after that. Be careful where you start. It's never the difficulty of a thing, of an element, of a scene, of an item that makes it engaging, because the reader will have no context for it. If you just tell me it's really hard, I have to believe you. Can you go sideways? Yeah, you can totally go sideways. Can you go from a physical challenge to an emotional one? Absolutely. You can go physical to emotional. So there's a couple different layers there, right? I didn't bring this up in the chart. That's a really good point. So there are physical challenge. I have to go do stuff. Emotional challenge. I have to feel stuff. Social challenge. I have to deal with other people's stuff. Sometimes called psychological challenge or mental challenge. I have to think stuff. Those are your most common layers of developing different facets and dimensions of character elements. You can totally slide from one to the next and bounce all around. And sometimes a scene's going to have more than one thing altogether. So yeah, you can totally go sideways. That's fine. You can also it's called sustaining, where you have this idea of like, so we have our first element in the story, our first scene where there's a challenge, and then we have that same level of challenge for a handful, however many things, and then later we escalate. So if we were assigning numbers to it, you'd have, I'm going to just make numbers up, a 3, a 3, a 3, a 3, and then go to 5 or 4 or 4.2. We don't want to go 3, 3, 3, 9 because that jump seems too big, too much, too out of control. Because we just barely got through the 3s. We want to keep the reader feeling like, yeah, our hero doesn't totally have the deck stacked against him, but it's not exactly like, oh, yawn stretch, it's no big deal. We want to give him just enough challenge to keep the character going and just enough challenge to keep the reader engaged. Hope you're well. Raiders always pops up as an example in writing. Is it because it's so concise and the plot beats are clear cut? Yes. Raiders is a great writing example because it's a perfect action movie. It's perfect, I'm making air quotes, because the beats are really clear cut. The iterations between each beat are really clear. You see why we're going from this scene to that scene. There's always an intro, there's always an outro, there's always a goal, there's always a challenge. It's every scene is really illustrative of what it needs to do. This is a dialogue scene. This is an example of how a dialogue scene goes. This is an info dump scene. It's one of those things where you can pull any scene out and know immediately all the parts and use it as an example of what to kind of sort of do. Tim Burton's original Batman is also like that. Loads of movies, even movies now, are like that. It's not, this is not an old man yelling at clouds. It's just that Raiders is a really good way of structuring things. Silence of the Lambs is also good. Psycho. There's loads of great movies, loads of great stories that just give us a chance to go, okay, we can pull any scene out of this, identify the challenges, the characters, and all the parts. It's really just clearly and well written. Good question. Now, I'm going to get to this third exercise because we're going to talk about characters in action. One of the worst writing exercises of all time, it still happens, is you imagine your character just doing stuff. Put your character in a scene where XYZ happens. Your character gets into a fight at a bar. Describe it. That means nothing. It pulls the character into a vacuum, and it misunderstands the point of that whole exercise. So we tend to think of characters as actors, people who take action. The problem is that we only focus on the action before it happens and after it happens. That guy punches the other one in the face. The focus is on the contact, the strike, the swing, and we skip the middle part, the stuff that compelled the action, the description of the movement itself. Because we just want to talk about the endpoints because they're more clear. That whole middle bit, unclear. Writers and writer adjacent people will also complain that if you start focusing on the middle part, you run off the rails and everybody starts becoming like research monkeys. We have to become doctors in order to understand biology because if I write a sentence about punching, you need to understand how bones break. No, that's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying that you don't only want to think about action in terms of start finish. There's a middle ground. And in that middle ground, we have enormous potential for writing, an enormous ability to engage the reader and describe things in more than just verb centric ways. So we have an idea. We are taught that there is a start and an end, and the middle is just this flat thing. Tom swings at Kevin. Susie yells at Sarah. And we tend to think about it as an even expression. The verb is just a thing, and it happens, and then we go to the next sentence. And for a lot of sentences, that's totally fine because it's not that big a deal. However, sometimes some actions, some characters take, some scenes are a big deal because they're super meaningful or because they're super complex or because, oh, you're welcome, Pete. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. those actions characters take can be simple. Character does fill in the blank verb, but there can be so much more to it. There can be meaning, there can be weight, there can be momentum and urgency and feelings and consequences and all this extra stuff. So, really, instead of thinking it as just straight line from beginning to end of action, maybe it's kind of a jagged line. The dashed line you're seeing on the bottom corner of the graphic is supposed to be like that, but I suck at drawing. So, it's a dashed line that's all bent up. But the bottom line is all squiggly because that's also a way of understanding things. So, sometimes the character moment, the action, the thing that the character is dealing with is not just a simple verb. We could summarize it as a simple verb. Person verbs other person. But what we want to do is think about the verb in terms of steps, pieces, components, because that way we're not just limited to writing down the verb. We could just go, A verbs B. Tom punches Kevin. But we could also take that idea and go, okay, so at the end of this scene or the end of this sentence, at the end of this paragraph, somebody's getting hit. We could come at this in a couple different directions. So the tool here is to think about accomplishments and obstacles. Obstacles are the low point in an action. It's the thing you're trying to overcome. It's the difficult part. It's as crunchy and technical as you want it to be, it's still the hard thing that you're dealing with. An accomplishment is what the character gains in the course of action. It's the expenditure of energy or the end result reward. And again, the whole point of this exercise is to not make things more complicated for you. It's to get you to think that you don't only need to think of just A verbs B and just write stiff, boxy crap sentences. It's about being able to go, okay, I can come at this scene from 100 different directions. It doesn't always need to be about the verbs in a fist fight. I can talk about feelings. I can talk about actions. I can talk about descriptions. There's loads of different ways to interface with my idea so that we don't only have A verbs B. And each action carries with it or contains the potential to carry with it loads of different stuff. Rocky. We could summarize Rocky as those two guys punch each other until the bell rings. But that misses and cuts out and simplifies a lot of very important stuff. Because, yes, that is accurate. In the same way that we could summarize, any war movie with those guys fight those guys. Sure. But you're cutting out a lot when you do that. And we don't want to cut that stuff out. We want to be able, if we want to tell a more gripping, a more detailed story, we want to be able to contain those pieces and use them. So accomplishments and obstacles on a per sentence level can give us that. And yeah, sure, we're just talking about one punch. A verbs B, Tom punches Kevin. We could write that one sentence and just have that be the action and then move to the next action. Or we could stop and come at it a different way. Have a sentence about feelings, have a sentence about thoughts or emotion, or, talk about the end result first. We could come at this in loads of different ways, not just the verb. Let me give you an example because I think this will make it easier. Into the Spider-Verse. Into the Spider-Verse has a scene that everybody thinks about where Miles, at the end of the movie, leaps off the building and he accepts his role as Spider-Man. Now, at the bottom of the screen, this is straight from the screenplay. Miles walks to the edge of the roof, the wind buffeting, and leaps. The camera is upside down. Miles isn't falling through frame, he's rising. Now, the capital letters in the screenplay give us emphasis. They give us some kind of direction, some way of framing the idea. Leaps, big deal action. Upside down, framework. Rising, sensation. However, If you just read that paragraph, if you just read that page in the screenplay, okay, sure. But when you see the visual, you hear the music, you've watched the whole movie, it feels so much more. It's a much bigger deal. It's not just a leap. It's not just a verb. It's a huge deal. It's him accepting the leap of faith that everybody's told him to take. It's him accepting that everybody grows into the costume. It's him becoming who he's supposed to be. It's him being brave. It's him going to do the right thing. It's him taking a risk. And yeah, it's a leap in the sense that that is the verb that best illustrates the action, but the action is not only the verb. Also, while he's rising, falling, whatevering through the frame, there's a million other things we could be telling about. We could talk about the ground approaching his face. We could talk about his thoughts about his uncle, his thoughts about his dad, his thoughts about his mom, his thoughts about the city, his thoughts about his friends. We could talk about the spider senses tingling as he moves through the world and, the sense of gravity. And we could come at this in loads of different ways so that we don't just fixate on leap as a verb. The exercise here is that when you've got a verb, and I'm going to break it down at this level, when you have a verb, any verb, I don't care what it is, that character who's engaging with that verb, who's doing that thing, they're having an experience in the story at that moment, and they've got a goal in mind, and they've got an obstacle to overcome because they're trying to do this verb. You've got to poke that experience with a stick. Okay, why are they doing this? Why are they doing this way? If I were the one doing it this way, what would I feel? That does not mean all the answers to those questions have to make it onto the page, but they become options, arrows to draw from your quiver, tools you can use, other ways you could write it. They're choices. You're no longer locked into only knowing how to write it this one way. Every action has a climax. The act of doing a thing isn't just he does a thing. There's a beginning and a middle and an end to it. Find the climax of each action, and you will find the most critical point you want to communicate to somebody else. So here it's the leap, but the leap is built on the back of all these thoughts and all these feelings and all this theme and all this stuff. But if we look at the leap itself, where's the moment where it matters the most? Because that's the moment, that single set, it's this frame right here that is the picture on the video that you're watching. That moment where suddenly there's a transition here out where everything just clicks for the hero and we move the story forward. Find every action's climax. What part of a character doing a thing is the most important part to that character in that moment? Not for the plot, but for the character in their experience. If I didn't go with Spider-Verse, I would have used Karate Kid, because the crane kick, when he kicks the blonde kid in the face, the most important part of the crane kick isn't the kick. It's where he gets into the stance before the kick. Why? Because he doesn't think he can do it. And him doing it, him accepting that it's possible to do, and him not sure he can do it, and him seeing Miyagi nodding his head when he's shaking his head, and suddenly then him trying it, is the culmination, the synthesis of all these different points. It's the climax of that action, so that the kicking the blonde kid in the face to win the trophy is an afterthought. It's a foregone conclusion. You want to build to the climaxes of each action. Even if it's just a sentence like, John is hungry. John wants to press the button and move to the next slide. Find the climax of your actions, and you will see that the verbs in each sentence carry so much more potential. It doesn't just have to be simple verb construction. That's the point of this exercise. Let's do another one. So we just talked about a verb's big moment, the big thing that's most important. But let's talk about a character's big moment, big picture stuff. Let's zoom out a little bit. How do we write a character's biggest moment? Too often, writers will lock into just the high point of the mountain. Here's the character doing cool stuff, and because the cool stuff's cool. Oh, that's awesome that they shoot fire out of their face, or oh, they're able to do the impossible thing because it's awesome and it looks cool. But the only reason it's as cool as it is because prior to that moment, there were moments that were decidedly not cool that got us to the moment where we could be cool. And just so I stop sounding like an old person using the word cool over and over, the thinking is this: you can't understand, or the reader can't understand the full height of something without seeing the breadth of the depth and the construction to it. The high point is only high because we can appreciate the low points that came before it. So there's this idea called proportionality. This is a really common, especially in the US, teaching tool for kind of laying out the idea of stories having big deals. The problem with proportionality is that it's limited, like a lot of other things, because it doesn't have any nuance. Proportionality is the idea that you can measure the ups with the downs. That if you have a character at a low point, let's say it's a minus 10, that because it's a minus 10, your big high point can be a plus 10 because it's the most on the scale, right? You have to have a low point as low as your high point is high. No, just no. It doesn't work that way. I mean, you can, but it's not only that because your things aren't equal. And the idea of having negative numbers on the scale is weird to me because to me, a negative number would suggest the app would be a less than zero, a thing that doesn't happen. Like a -1 is the absence as opposed to just low. So rather than just say your 10 has to match your -10, I just scale upward on a different scale. So 5, neutral is okay. 5 up to 10. Start at 1. It doesn't have to match. You just have to move. You just have to have a low point. The danger, the hard part, is if your lowest point is, if we're just following a 1 to 10 scale, if your lowest point is a 4, that's not necessarily going to make your 10 feel all that big. And you want it to feel big because it's a 10. So you've got to often think about how to adjust, how to modulate different moments in the story. How do I make this thing feel like a bigger deal? You don't have to change the verb. You just have to change how the reader is going to relate to this moment. Get in the character's head, describe it differently, slow the thing down. Loads of different tools like that to help put this thing together. Proportionality is fine. It's a starting point, but it's not the only point. It's not the best way to do it. And if you'd like to fight me on the internet about it, I'm happy to fight you on the internet about it. What we want to do is make sure that our low points feel low and our high points feel high because the low points feel low. Let's do some examples. Kung Fu Panda. It's awesome. Love this movie. So here's a low point in Kung Fu Panda. Poe, Jack Black over here, hates it. He's miserable. He's not feeling like he's got anything going for him. Everybody hates him. Everybody makes fun of him. He really wants to be this cool thing. Everybody's telling him he can be the cool thing. He's got a lot of self-doubt. He's having this really hard time. The low point for a character, any low point for a character, not their lowest point, because the lowest point is one of the low points for a character, because there's going to be other low points. Any low point for a character is measured, evaluated based on what that character's goal is and how far away they are from it at the time. how they think, how they feel they're far away. Not the actual plot reason. Not the you, the writer reason. I, the writer, know that there are 7 scenes between here and there, so they're not as bad off as they think they are. Nope. Don't do that. Don't do that. Not a good move. What you want to do instead is put yourself in the character's position. The character doesn't know that there's 7 scenes between here and there where they suddenly get it. The character doesn't know that's going to happen yet. So you shouldn't act like it. All characters function in a context. Oh, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. It's going to keep going. Check it out. Check it out on YouTube later, or check it out as a podcast later this afternoon. Thanks for being here. Characters don't exist in a vacuum, and the low points don't exist in a vacuum. It's context. It's all context. It's boatloads of context. Context for a character is their idea and understanding of their current situation, plus their current of the moment self-perception. How they think they are, wherever they think they're at, is how they perceive things to be. So Poe, Jack Black, is having this terrible moment where he's like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, because that's the moment he's in, and that's how he feels. It is not like the sum total of everything. It's just his experience of the moment. And if you're able to nail that down in a scene, any time, your reader will connect with the character more. And if you can do that and hit those low moments and develop them and make them feel something awesome, then when we get to the big giant moment where, oh my God, he really can learn Kung Fu, you get your desired end result of, yeah, Poe, kick ass. And then because it's Kung Fu Panda, I cry because this movie makes me cry. Character moments are about transitioning from the internal to the external. The internal context of, I don't think I'm good enough, to suddenly externalizing it. I am good enough. Look, I'm learning Kung Fu. Character moments are cumulative. They stack up. We talked about that before with Raiders of the Lost Ark. We talked about that before with Spider-Verse. Things are cumulative. And they're, my margins are all off on my graphic, but they're, about movement and growth and progression. So Pete asks this question. In my story, would I need to let the reader know why the bully is bullying the other guy? No. Because you're coming at it from the bully's side in that. You want to come at it from the other guy's side, the recipient of the bullying. Because that's who the reader, unless the character that you want the reader to care about is the bully, you want to make sure the reader connects with the right person. So if our character of interest is the bully, then yeah, you do. You want to make sure the reader understands why the character has to bully the other guy. But if our main character is the guy being bullied, the specific, accurate, 100% correct, would get an A on the test reason is less important than the guy's perception as to why the bully is bullying him. It's not about explaining it. It's about creating an emotional space for it. Because the explanation can be as simple as, every Tuesday, Derek takes my lunch money. That's an explanation. That solves the question. But if we can talk about how I feel when Tuesday rolls around, oh God, it's Tuesday, Derek's coming to take my lunch money. All of a sudden, the reader's going to care more. Character moments are cumulative. They're about movement, growth, and progression. And the high point for a character is the high point because we've had not only that low moment by itself, but everything up to that point. All the points in between. As a character gains the sense that they're able to accomplish their goal, reader emotional satisfaction increases because, oh, I think they can do it. I think Poe can defeat the guy. I think Neo can be the one. He's learning Kung Fu. Spider-Man is leaping off that building. I think he can win. At the end of the day, we are trying to develop and increase emotional satisfaction. We do that by making sure our characters transition from internal limitation to external potential. I don't think I'm very good at this. I'm fucking Spider-Man. I can jump off a building. Internal to external. Grow your emotional satisfaction. Move the character forward as things escalate. Still with me? Shall we keep going? Fifth, we're going to move now to world building. We did 2 plot, we did 2 character. Now we're going to do 2 world building. World building is one of those things where people like either do very, very little of it in terms of writing exercise. They just go, have a world, and sort of stop there. Or they go to the other extreme and they detail like the political ramifications of every like plant and shrub in the forest. And they go too far. We don't want to go too far. We just want to get you thinking that your world is not just a flat stage that you cut away to when you need a break. The plot of your story is a crisis for the world. Now, I'm not just talking about like the big giant picture. I mean different layers of the world, but it's a crisis. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the plot. So now, Pete's got this other question. So could you tease the hero will succeed, then they don't, only to give them a second chance when they do? Yes, you could totally do that, Pete. That frequently happens in sports underdog movies, fight movies. Any underdog story does that. That's really common. Just go to town. Do what you got to do. I'm going back to my world building. You've got the plot for your story. Whatever it is. Anything. Gotta go blow up the Death Star. Gotta rescue the princess from the tower. Gotta win the big race. That challenge is a crisis in the world of the characters. So if we have a sports story like the Mighty Ducks, which is not an example I used but could have, where the big thing is we have to win this like the city tournament. We have to be taken seriously as a team because we're the screw ups. Like that's not going to change geopolitics. That's not going to change the rotation of the earth. That's not going to help stop Thanos or anything. It's just a bunch of kids learning how to ice skate together. But the challenge of winning that tournament is a crisis for the world of the characters because the world of the characters, as the characters have come to know it, is all about hockey, is all about that particular moment because there are levels and scope. So there are 3 scopes in crisis development for world building. There's close scope, local scope, and global scope. I'm going to try and do this without saying the word scope 20 times. Close, local, and global. Close asks the questions, what's happening around the characters right now? So your character's world can be as big as the globe, but it's usually their house, their friends, and the shop down the street. Yes. Yes, it is. That's right, Ross. Close scope is what's immediately around them. John's in the office. He's talking into this microphone. He's trying to get through this material. What's around him right now? I'm running out of water. The cat is asleep. I think both cats are asleep. And it's warm in here because I turned the heat on. How are they moving and interacting in this space? Well, I'm sitting in my chair desperately trying not to cough. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? It's immediate around them. We are not concerned with like the other stuff that might be happening in the house, like the dishwasher or the laundry or something. We're not thinking about like the mad genius in the one town over or like global atrocities halfway across the planet. We're just right around the basic sphere of our character. Now we're going to zoom out. Now we're going to look at local. Local is If the character and their immediate actions in space is close, local is zoomed out a little bit. It's not just John in the office, it's this house on the street, maybe the town, maybe my distance between here and the place where I go get, chicken and snacks, or the grocery store. World's a little bit bigger. I still have a relationship with it, but I feel as things get bigger, I have less direct control or less ability to change it. I can change where I move stuff in the office. I can move the microphone. I can move the chair. I can move the desk. I have the ability at a close scope to affect significant change. Local, I can't move where the grocery store is. I would love to. I would love to give it like a few more parking spaces and like a back exit so I don't have to keep looping all around and everything, getting stuck in traffic. But I can't. Once I leave close, once the scope in the world grows past close, the character progressively feels they can't directly change things without taking substantial challenge. Like if I had superpowers or money or, I don't know, a big crane or something, I could move the grocery store. But that is a huge challenge and a huge change to me to make a huge change locally. So now from local, we're going to go to globe. And global is the biggest picture. So if we're looking at me in the office and then me in town, global could be me in the state or the planet or the continent or the galaxy. It's the biggest picture that our story contains. Now that's going to make your character feel really small. They might be really powerful, but they're still really small. Because if you fail to make your character feel small on the big stage, you've made them feel too powerful. And it's hard for the reader to connect with that because why would anything be a challenge for them? Because remember, a few exercises back, we wanted to escalate things. It's real hard to escalate things when you're just like, oh yeah, it's no big deal. You want it to be a big deal. You want the character to consistently face challenge as we go from close, local to global. Zoom out, scale up. So let's look at some examples. I got one you're probably not expecting. A great example of scope and world in crisis, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. So, local scope for our heroes, Bill and Ted. They have to pass history class. And while they are out trying to figure out what they're going to do, they encounter George Carlin in a phone booth and suddenly realize then that their world is not just limited to history, but they have massive consequences with the way things are. Wild stallions will bring peace to all things because they will learn how to, be excellent to each other and party on, dude. Local, close, and global are the three levels through which characters move through their world. And as you go out, as you zoom out in the world, your character adjusts their focus because the challenges change, the assumptions change, and the circumstances change. If we're just two guys hanging out at the Circle K because, oh man, strange things are afoot at the Circle K, dude, then when we suddenly get into the circuits of time and we suddenly realize that, oh, we got so much more to deal with and so much more to do, we've changed things. We're no longer the same persons. And then when we go into the future and, tell everybody to be excellent to each other. Yeah, that's just us acting as we normally would, as though we were at the Circle K. But now on the biggest stage, things are totally different. So how can we simplify this? How can we turn this into something that'll make a difference in your writing? Remember this: close scope always wins. Because at the end of the day, what do Bill and Ted do? They travel through time, they meet up all these people, but at the end of the day, they still give the world's first TED Talk. they go to their high school, they give their performance. Because to them, no matter what, and it's not because they're just two like dudes, but no matter what, to them, everything is closed scope. Everything is the history class, passing the class, and all that other stuff. Oh, that's awesome, dude. But like, we got to do this history thing. Characters focus on what's in front of them. Even if what's in front of them is, I have to fire 2 space torpedoes from my space biplane to blow up the Death Star, or I have to ride this giant sandworm in order to unite the people so that I can later become super space dictator, or I have to prevent Chris Pratt from ruining the middle of my Marvel movie so that half the population doesn't die, whatever it might be. Characters focus on what's in front of them. So we need to ask, what's in front of my character right now? Wherever they're at, whatever's going on, what's in front of them right now? Because that's what they can affect. It might be a big deal. They might be firing 2 missiles into the Death Star and it'll liberate the galaxy. But to them, it's, I'm just firing 2 missiles to do this thing. I'm trusting the Force. There's a British guy in my head telling me to, shoot missiles. Ask yourself what's in front of your character right now. You, as a writer, may have to divorce that thought from all this other stuff. All the like, well, I know in the story they have to do this because in a movie from now, this is going to happen. And then 2 books from now, that's going to happen. And what about these 5? No, 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 no. What's in front of the character right now? One of the most critical writer tools you have is your ability to put some blinders on temporarily and just deal with what's in front of you. It's going to make a huge difference. Shall we keep going? Questions so far? We've got one more exercise. Your world in levels. We just talked about scope. That's one set of levels. Let's look at a different set of levels. Every world has levels. There are constant tiers and balances and different groups and alignments and factions and opportunities and experiences. And your story slides and bends and moves between all of them. I know your story is just character goes from here to here to here and does a thing. Fight a bad guy, throw a ring into a volcano, whatever the hell it is. But there's more to your story than that. Your story has all these different pieces. Some of them the reader's going to find out about. Some of them the reader's not going to know about. Some of them you're going to write paragraphs of info about. Some you'll just barely mention. But if you want your story to have a real sense of depth and feel really coherent, like you've really built something that's well architected, you, the writer, have to have in your head a sense of all these different things and how they swirl together. And I think for a lot of writers, they get very overwhelmed very quickly because they hear me say this and then think to themselves, well, if I have to keep it in my head, it's got to be a big deal in my story. Nope. No, it doesn't. But you do have to be aware of it. Everything is those spirographs we had as kids? Maybe you didn't have one. It was this pen thing, and then you move it around a box, and it makes all these loops and fractal and stuff. All these different pieces of your story connect to each other in some way, shape, or form. There's some kind of relationships. Find them. So, social class, belief structure, those two things can inform each other. Geography can inform belief structure. Geography can also inform group affiliation, which can inform occupation, which can tell you about economic status, which gives you maybe some object possession abilities. There's a pile of different levels. Let's go through them individually. This is by no means the hyper definitive list, but these are the biggies and they're worth knowing. So, on some level in your world, there's social class. Now, maybe that's, nobility, peasantry, guilds, people. Maybe it's, you know, um, people who have jobs and people who don't have jobs. Maybe it's the wealthy, whatever. There's a social class system somewhere in your world. Even if you've never thought about it, even if it's not part of your world has one. Even if your social class is just everybody's a person, period, done. Still counts. Still counts. Other thing, belief structure. Everybody in your world believes something. Doesn't matter what it is. Maybe it's religious belief. Maybe it's scientific belief. Maybe it's everybody has a favorite cookie. I don't know. But there are belief structures in your world. Find them. Abilities. People have abilities to do things. Some more so than others, some less so than others. There are group affiliations. This isn't necessarily social class. This could also be like, I work for this company and you work for that company. There's also geography. I live here, you live there. And it could be as simple as, I live at, this is my, I live here in this house. My best friend is 2 doors over. Or it could be something as complicated as you live in the Shire and they live in Rohan. That's fine. But geography is a different level in your world. Economic status. Who has the ability to have, create, spend money? Occupation. That can be as simple as I'm a student and they're my parent, or it could be, fighter, thief, wizard, bard, whatever. Object possession. We have computers and phones. Maybe it's people who have cars versus people who don't have cars. Maybe it's, people who um people who have pets and don't. I don't know. Identity, whether that's gender, racial, ethnic, whatever. Identity. That's a great level in a world. Loads of different people, loads of different identities, all valid, but they are different, as constructed as they might be. Also, experience. People who, had a certain experience or didn't. People who went to college and people who didn't. People who have given birth versus people who haven't. People who have, you know, broken a bone or not. There are always relationships to sort out and organize between characters in your world. Many of them, a lot of them are going to be benign and not a big deal. Ah, that's a priest. Ah, that's a wizard. Done. Stop. No more. We don't always need to put everybody at each other's throats. It can be helpful. It can create tension. We'll talk about that in a second. But there's always relationships. There's always levels. There's always different ways of encountering and engaging with different things in the world. It doesn't just sit on a flat shelf, everything equal, everything uniform. That is a fundamentally boring way to interface with story. You're building a puzzle and all the pieces have to fit. Yes, that's a great way of putting it. Let's throw that on screen because that's really, really good. You're building a puzzle, all the pieces have to fit. Yes. How do things fit? Maybe they just sit next to each other and call it a day. Maybe they're at odds with each other. Maybe people from company A, secretly go out at night and torch the cars from company B. I don't know. It's your story. But your pieces have some kind of relationship to each other in order to figure out how they fit. So the example I use for this is the Dungeons and Dragons movie, the newest one, the good one, because those levels are very overt because there are adventurers and nobility and good guys and bad guys and classes, and it's all very straightforward. So what you want to do when you're making your story, even if it's not fantasy, even if it's just, like regular romance novel, you want to look all the time for how the different levels and layers of your story interact with each other. Thieves got to thieve. Wizards got to whiz, I guess. Good guys got to do good guy things. Bad guys got to be bad guys. Guilds people have money. or guild goods. Pirates got a pirate. I don't know. Your world is a list of things in some kind of balance. And ideally, something comes along, the plot, something comes along and interacts with these levels to maybe, possibly, probably tip the balance. The world is in tenuous balance. And things interact maybe peacefully, maybe not. And the characters don't have to be the catalysts for this. It could just be a thing that's happening way over there that we hear about and never deal with. Oh, I heard there was a war in Gilder. Okay. Are we going there in the story? No, but it's there. I heard there was a bread shortage in Marion. Yep. Okay, cool. The world's balance is maybe as thin as possible in some spots and thick in others, or maybe non-existent at all. But you've got to figure out what's balanced. How is it balanced? How easily can it be kicked over? The characters don't always have to be the one doing the kicking, but that world can still be a thing. Because while you and I are sitting here talking half a world away, some people are in real danger. We might not know it. There might not be diddly squat you and I sitting here talking can do about it, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. But that's the way you can think about this. The world's levels always interact, slide, buckle, push up, fight, and press against each other, even if the characters don't take action. A lot of agents in particular and editors talk about how they want the world to feel alive and the world should feel like a character in your story. Here's how you do it. Levels, layers, interaction. You don't just make a flat room. Oh, you're in a room with 4 boxes and 2 doors. It's not enough. Tension, challenge, conflict, interaction between levels and layers. That's what sets this up. Because the world of your story, big picture, medium picture, little picture, is always, 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 always going to test who the character is. It's going to test their moral code, why they believe what they believe, and it's going to be a test for their skills. Because ideally, your character or characters move through their world uneasy, meaning things don't always feel settled, and uneasily, meaning they face challenge. Because that's what makes them the main characters of the story. If everything was like ho hum, no big deal, they would not be a very interesting main character. A character's goal in a scene, in a chapter, in part of a book, in a whole book, those goals are informed by the push and pull of their moral code against the levels they interact with in the world. Batman feels like he can't kill unless you're Zack Snyder, then you give him guns. Batman feels like he can't kill. And that moral code is pushed up against all the different bad guys he has to kick in the face. Your moral, your character. This is why when we talk about character building, and I tell you again and again that your character's moral code is that missing piece. It's that thing that really helps like separate the well-crafted characters from the kind of pretty okay characters. It's because their moral code is the thing, the idealized best self of them that is tested and pushed on by the world. Which is why you have to give Superman a weakness. Yes, it's why you have to give Superman a weakness or challenge. It's because you need that test. Otherwise, Superman is unrelatable. Because he's Superman. That's why we go to such lengths to humanize Superman. It's what makes Superman better than Batman. Because Superman needs the test. All characters need that test. They're driven to do a thing. They're not doing a thing just because the plot says they're here to do a thing. They're here to do a thing because they have a goal. And that goal they figured out, they chose, they picked because they made decisions. Those decisions they made were fueled or driven by what they believe. I think I'm this kind of character, so I will do this kind of action. So because I'm doing this kind of action, this is the way the story goes for me. Character goals are informed by the push-pull of moral code against the world. If there's no push-pull between the world and the character's moral code, either the world is too flat or the moral code is too rigid or too unimportant. Don't sit in extremes. Extremes are real boring, like painfully boring, and we could all do better. Shall we recap and get out of here? So let's recap. All actions in a plot, all of them, could, should, and would have consequences somewhere in the story. Maybe that's right away, or maybe that's later. But there should be consequences. We should be able to point to them in the story. There, that sentence, that chapter, that paragraph, that part, consequence. Plot, whatever your plot is always escalating to somewhere for some reason. Why is Indiana Jones going after the Ark? Because the Army intelligence guy and Porkins told him to. Why is he going to Nepal? Because he needs the headpiece to the Staff of Ra. Why are they going to Egypt? Because that's where the digging happens. Why are they, why is he punching that Nazi? Because Nazis need punches. Plot is always moving forward for some reason. Actions are containers for context. Somebody's doing something because in that moment, they have a goal they're trying to solve or resolve by doing this action. Tom punches Kevin because in this moment, Tom's problem can only be solved, or Tom believes, can only be solved by punching Kevin in the face. Sure, there's 15 other things Tom could do. He could cast a spell. He could, mesmerize. He could duct tape Kevin's face shut. Nope. Tom's solving his problems through punching. Actions are containers for context. They are not just verbs. Next point. What a character does and why they do it, whatever they're doing, driving the car, heading off to the motel in the rain to meet their lover, telling the joke at the wedding reception, stealing the piece of bread to feed their family, whatever they're doing, is a balance between what they expect. If I do this, this will happen. If I don't do this, that will happen. If things stay as the way they are, this could be the end result. Expectation and context. Here's how things are right now. Expectation and context are the two major factors that propel characters through whatever they're doing. Here's where we're at. This is what we want to do. How do we make this happen? Expectation, context. Next thing. Characters, for all their abilities, for all their definitions. Oh, they're a superhero. Oh, they're a supernatural being. Oh, they're a guy who likes rock music. Whatever they are. Characters only ever deal with the whole world in crisis one step at a time right in front of them. For instance, if I just went to you and was like, hey, go fix France, you would have no idea what that means and no idea what to do about it because that's a really weird thing for me to tell you. But if I say, hey, I need you to go talk to these people and convince them to do this thing, All of a sudden, I've taken the same idea, go fix France, and I've made it contextually relevant to you. Characters deal with a world in crisis only and always in front of them. And lastly, that world in crisis is a suspension, like an unshaken salad dressing in your fridge, a suspension of volatile levels barely held together. And the story's going to come along, the plot's going to come along and shake up the salad dressing to some degree. Maybe not all the layers will come into contact with each other, but some will. Some will a little bit, some will a lot. But the salad dressing is getting shaken. The world is a suspension of volatile levels barely holding on. Those 6 points will inform how you're writing whatever you're writing. So, before we get out of here, any questions? Because I've been talking nearly an hour and 45 minutes. Good grief. Questions? Anything? Shall we get out of here? Can I expand on actions are not verbs? Absolutely, I can. So, the easiest way to think about actions are just in the verbs. Jason Bourne drives the car. Tom punches Kevin. We just think verb and then move on to the next verb and move on to the next verb and move on to the next verb. And we just end up writing, even if our sentences are long with commas and stuff, they're still pretty simple constructions because we start just chaining together. Hey, reader, think of this action. Think of that action. Then this third action. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not bad. It's going to happen a lot when you write, and that's fine. But we want to be able to do more than just give the reader very stiff, very static directions. Picture this, picture that, picture this, picture that. We want to do better than that because we want the reader to be engaged, right? We want the reader to sit there and read this thing. Oh my God, what about what? I got to keep turning the page. This is fucking badass. I love this book. That's what we want. We're going to get there by thinking about the action a character is taking as more than just a sentence we could say with a verb. So yeah, you could write Tom punches Kevin. And believe me, Kevin's going to get punched. That's happening. But between now and then, before we get to the sentence that says, Tom nails Kevin in the schnoz, before we get there, we have unlimited time and space to detail a ton of things that make the action feel way more important, a much bigger deal. We could spend 2 paragraphs talking about, in that moment, Tom felt every memory of every time Kevin left the wet towel on the bathroom floor. Tom remembered every time Kevin laughed at him for, poor video game play. Whatever it is, we can create a whole thing, however many sentences, however many memories, and make this punch feel like an inevitable conclusion to obviously Kevin needs to be punched. Look at all the shit Kevin's been doing to Tom. And then we can go one extra step because we don't only have to say Tom punched Kevin. We can change the way we frame this idea. And instead of making it, A verbs B, we can go to say something like Kevin Kevin felt only 2 things in the next 10 seconds. Something hit his face and then Kevin hit the ground. We still had Tom punch Kevin, but now we've done something more artsy. The action a character takes does not always need to be simplified down to a sentence. Sometimes we can expand things. Sometimes we can't. Sometimes you just have to have a sentence because you got to have a sentence. But sometimes we can pick and choose and go, oh, yeah, I could put some oomph behind it. I could say more words. That's what I mean. Did that answer your question? Did that help better? How does it look on the page? Paragraphs. What I think I might do for next week, I think next week I want to show you what it looks like on the page. I think I want to show you text. I think I will make on-page examples. Would that work? Would that be cool? Could we do that? Like, here's how you write an exposition paragraph. Here's how you write a dialogue. Like, this is what it looks like on the page. Here's how you put fingers on keys. Oh, you're welcome, guys. No worries. Oh, new person. Hello, new person. Hi. Thanks for being here. I do this all the time. Yeah, I think next week, where's my notepad? The cat is sitting on my notepad. Hang on a minute. We're going to use a post-it note because the cat's on my notepad. Where's my pen? Show on page. Yeah, next week we'll do on page stuff. We'll make that the next Tuesday stream. I don't know. I'll figure it out. I'll start working on that this afternoon. Okay? Cool? Cool. We good? Anything else? I should have been doing this on YouTube far more than Twitch. I like Twitch. Twitch is great, but Twitch has this paywall thing you got to navigate, and that's not always fair to everybody. And I was always worried about YouTube being like, that's where the trolls are. I don't want to deal with that because I'm just one person doing one guy's thing. But whatever, it's fine. We'll do the next one on YouTube too. Makes me happy. Other questions, or shall we get out? Have I yammered enough? New person, hi. There's hundreds of hours of stuff on this channel. Let's get out of here. I also need more water. Otherwise, I'm going to start coughing. So let's get out of here. If you have more questions, well, let's go one more slide. All right. Thank you so much for being here. It really means the world to me. Really, it does. You have no idea how much this thrills me. I love doing these things. This one was great. This might be my best ever. It's these things get better and better the more I go. It's awesome. If you want more of this, of course, check out the YouTube channel. It's packed with stuff. If you want me in your ears every day, well, Monday to Thursday, every week, wherever you get your pods, wherever you grab your podcasts, I'm everywhere. Search for John Helps You Write Better. And it's me in your ears for at least 10 minutes a day, talking about stuff, tons of stuff, loads of stuff, all the time. I lost my train of thought. Oh, right. Patreon. If you liked this and you want more and you want to support everything I'm doing, as well as get like weekly content based on movies and television shows and books and stuff that's currently happening, that is in addition to the stuff I'm doing here, head over to the Patreon, patreon.com/John Helps You Write Better, because there's tons of stuff. What movie did we just do? I just did American Fiction and what did I just do? Anatomy of a Fall. Before that, we did Oppenheimer. We've done Goofies. I did all the Star Trek movies. There's years I've been doing this. Tons of stuff there. More stuff comes out multiple times a week. Patreon.com/John Helps You Write Better. And if you want individual, personal, how do I make my book better help for free, head over to johnhelpsyouwritebetter.com. Book a free appointment. I would love to help you do whatever it is you want to do. So if you're watching this in the future and you have questions, or you didn't understand something and you wanted me to go over it in more detail, ask down in the detail, ask down in the description comment thing, the YouTube stuff. Ask down there. I'll answer you. I promise I will. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for checking this out. It really meant the world to me. The next time I'll be here in your eyes and in your ears, where we will apparently be doing like on the page, how do I write this down kind of examples, will be next Tuesday, the 9th at 1 p.m. Eastern, right here on youtube.com/John Adamus. That's me, John, the guy who's going to help you write better. So thank you so much for being here. It means the world. Go have a great day. I love you. Take care of yourself. Tell somebody you care about them. Wash your hands. Take your meds. Drink some water. Have a nap. Do something that's good for you. You deserve it. And I'll talk to you soon. See ya.